This episode is brought to you by Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/SBO. Terms and conditions apply.
This is Find Your Dream Job, the podcast that helps you get hired, have the career you want, and make a difference in life. I'm your host, Mac Pritchard. I'm also the founder of Mac's List. It's a job board in the Pacific Northwest that helps you find a fulfilling career. Every Wednesday, I talk to a different expert about the tools you need to find the work you want. There's only so much room on a page, and that space can seem even smaller when you make your case that you're the best person for the job. Kai River is here to talk about how to write a cover letter that makes you stand out. They are the Human Resources Administrator at Habitat for Humanity, Portland region. It's part of a global nonprofit housing organization that works across the United States and 70 other countries. They join us from Portland, Oregon. Well, let's get started, Kai. Why do cover letters still matter?
Well, cover letters still matter because it's a way to personalize your journey that you're going to be discussing on your resume and letting the person know what you'll bring to that position as well. Because you'll highlight yourself, highlight your experience, and then put it all together in a nice little present saying, this is why I'm good for the job.
What if an employer doesn't ask for a cover letter? Should you still write one, Kai?
It might be beneficial. Even if they don't request it, it'll be helpful for you for the interview process as well.
And you do a lot of hiring. What do employers like you want to see in a cover letter because as you're working your way through a tall stack of applications?
So what we like to see in cover letters is a little bit of personalization. We understand that when you're job searching, it can be kind of daunting looking at just a list of positions that you qualify for. And you're like, well, how do I explain that I'm actually going to be good at this job? So personalizing it, maybe going on our website, the company's website, looking at their mission and vision, and maybe pulling an example or two that really highlights some of those qualities within yourself or within the work you've done. And also it's a way to get to know how you're going to speak. It's also kind of like a culture check, seeing if you're going to be a good fit for or benefit the company more by bringing your personality and experience.
What don't employers want to see in cover letters?
A repeat of your resume. We appreciate all the work you put into a resume, but just seeing a list of qualifications again, or literally the same words copy and pasted into a different format, different document, it's a little redundant, and it tends to not pique as much interest and doesn't really highlight what we would want to see in that additional piece of material.
Any other mistakes that you see applicants make in cover letters that you want to call out?
Well, when you're personalizing, please make sure that you're putting the right company name and address on it. Because one way you can quickly personalize things is making sure you've got the correct address of the location and putting that mission and vision in the first paragraph. So please make sure you're changing that around. Also, the font. It should be readable. Sometimes we print them out, sometimes we don't. Using a pretty common font like Arial or Calibri that generally are used in Word, it makes it easier for us to print or the programs that we use to show them on the screen. Also, while a cover letter is something personal, please don't put your headshot or anything like that on the cover letter because well, one, it can take a lot of ink, and two, we want to try and be as objective as possible. And so even some hiring places remove names to be as objective as possible. So by adding that additional piece, it can just gum up the system a little bit more.
What about generic cover letters, Kai? What do you think of someone who just sends the same cover letter to every job?
Well, I mean, when you're dealing with a whole list of jobs that you're interested in and it seems like the same job, um, you might be tempted to send the same cover letter to everybody. And if you just see a generic one, to us as an employer, it makes us think that you might not have done the actual digging and look to see if we're actually a good culture fit for you, or you might not be as high on the potential candidate list because you're not really highlighting something that our company might be valuing more within the mission or vision or skill value that will come with the position. So even if it's just a little bit of a change, it definitely makes a big difference.
Well, let's talk about how to write a cover letter that makes you stand out. And I know one of the first tips you encourage people to follow is to use a cover letter to tell your story. Why is it important to do this?
Well, it's kind of like a one-sided conversation. I we don't really travel as much in elevators anymore because we are in a more hybrid work environment. But it's essentially a step up from an elevator pitch. Um, So you want to make sure that you're sharing why you want to work with the employer, how awesome you are, and in the end, just explain that you would be a great asset because it's a conversation that like you're trying to predict what they're going to ask based off of the job description, and it can be kind of hard to try and think about what kind of questions they might be asking from the employer side. So try to be proactive and think about, well, if I was hiring somebody in this position, what would I want to know about the person that's going to be in that position?
Tell us more about that structure you just outlined. There were three parts there. You say why you want to work for the employer, show how awesome you are, and explain why you're a good fit. Uh, what what's your best advice about how to do that? And is that a structure you should follow with every cover letter you write?
Yeah, I'll answer your second question first. I do think it's a structure that would be good for pretty much any cover letter that you would be writing. Um, and the main reason the structure is set up that way is you want to right off the bat let the organization know, hey, I am aligned with your mission and values, and that's going to pique their interest more because you're making that immediate emotional connection in a way. You're showing that you're already aligned with what they are already doing. And so it'll help them grow more. So it's kind of selfish, I guess, in a way, for the organization, but you're kind of catering to that because the second part um, of the of the cover letter, you're going to describe how awesome you are, and that really is going to be like a way of saying I would be a great fit. And here's a great example of like how I embody this, or here's a situation that I had to work through something and really use that middle part of the cover letter to describe that in a little bit more detail than what you would put in the resume. Um, One good way of doing this is something I learned, which is called STAR. So it's situation, task, action, and response. So think of a situation where you were a star or you had to work through something, what tasks you had to do in order to work through that, what you accomplished at the end, and the results from that. And that's a great way to just highlight yourself through the whole process. And you can talk about your own thought process at the same time um, in that cover letter, because again, it's that one sided conversation. Um, and then after you're done explaining how awesome you are, the last paragraph is a great way to just sum up like, highlight one of the key parts of the mission or vision that you showed in that meaty section of the cover letter and be like, this is a reason why I would be a great asset to your organization. So kind of like pulling it all together, and you want to make it so that when the person at the organization is reading the cover letter, you're making it easier for them to see you already in the position. They don't have to guess, well, why did they share that story? Because you already created those little connections.
Ooh, terrific. This is great. Stay with us. When we come back, Kai River will continue to share their advice on how to write a cover letter that makes you stand out. You say you learn a new language every year, but few of us actually commit to it. Babbel makes it easy for you to learn one in less time than you think. This year, speak like a whole new you with Babbel, the language learning app that gets you talking. In October, I'm going to Italy for a week for a silent film festival in the city of Pordenone. Babbel is helping me learn the basic phrases I need to talk with locals and find my way around this medieval city. Learn everything you need for your own travels, from vocabulary to culture, while holding your own in conversation with others. With Babbel, it takes only 10 minutes a day. Babbel is gifting our listeners 60% off subscriptions at babbel.com/dreamjob. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/dreamjob. Spelled BABBEL.com/dreamjob. Babbel.com/dreamjob. Rules and restrictions may apply. We all know that first impressions matter, and the first thing a hiring manager sees is your cover letter. That letter gives you an opportunity to wow an employer. But too many job seekers squander this chance. They send a cover letter with typos, a sloppy format, and cut-and-paste text. And it's not enough to avoid those rookie mistakes. You also have to tell a compelling story. This sounds complicated, but in fact, if you follow a few rules, you can write a cover letter that stands out from your competition. Our Max List Guide shows you how to do this. It's called Simple Rules for a Winning Cover Letter. Go to maxlist.org/cover letter. We show you the content, structure, and style that hiring managers like. You'll get examples and templates you can use to write your own winning cover letter. Get Simple Rules for a Winning Cover Letter today. Go to maxlist.org/cover letter. We're back in the Max List studio. I'm talking with Kai River. They are the Human Resources Administrator at Habitat for Humanity, Portland region. It's part of a global nonprofit housing organization that works across the United States and 70 other countries. They join us from Portland, Oregon. Now, Kai, before the break, we were talking about how to write a cover letter that makes you stand out. And we talked in that first segment about why employers want to see cover letters, what they're looking for when reading one, and some mistakes to avoid. And you took us through a 3-part structure that you can use to write a cover letter, which was very helpful. You also talked about the importance of storytelling. Could you say more, Kai, about how to apply storytelling ideas in addition to using the STAR technique to that 3-part structure?
With storytelling, there's generally beginning, middle, and end. And when you're doing that in a cover letter, it also just creates a sense of a completion of the whole story. That makes it easier for the person who's listening or reading to just place in the organization. And so with storytelling, definitely just saying where you started before, like in the STAR technique, whether it's situation, task, action, and response. Situation really shows where you started in that story. You can even be super honest in the cover letter. Like, I was not familiar with this type of technique, or I was just at entry level learning about how things were supposed to work in this position. And that bit of honesty really shows the growth that could come from sharing that story in the middle of the cover letter. And the result at the end of the story doesn't necessarily have to be oh, I brought so much KPI, numbers up and things like that. It could be just I was able to gain skills from this. And that again makes it more the story personable and helps the interviewer see you as a person, which everybody is a storyteller in their own way, even if they don't realize it.
I'm glad you made that point because I think sometimes listeners might think, "Oh, you need a special skill to tell your own story or any story," and obviously, we're all storytellers. Well, let's walk through some of the do's and don'ts of cover letters so that you can make yours stand out. And in the first segment, one of the don'ts you mentioned was don't include a photo of yourself in your cover letter. Uh, but let's talk about some of your do's. One is that you recommend uh, looking for ways to reuse material from past cover letters. How do you repurpose material from previous cover letters so that it doesn't sound generic? What are some of your tips here?
Well, what you can do is say you have a list of jobs that are all pretty similar and have different parts that are overlapping so that there's certain skills they're definitely looking for in those positions. You can reuse your story multiple times because the story in itself is a description of you, not necessarily how it ties directly to whatever the company is looking for. That's what the end of the cover letter is for, to show why you're a good fit. So definitely using that middle story section, you can copy and paste it, use it for multiple jobs. And then also in the intro paragraph, you can designate one or two sentences where you're specifically going to mention the mission and vision of the company that you're applying for, and why you're passionate about it, to kind of give that introduction into the story. So that way you don't have to be as intimidated when it comes to starting a cover letter. You've just got two sentences and maybe the bottom end, like saying, I'm excited to work for so and so company at the end to change. But it's still personable because you are going to be sharing a story that directly applies to the position. And that is really what is important.
What about electronic formats? Kai, do employers want to get a PDF, a Word document, a Google Doc? What do employers want to see?
Well, that's a very good question. And it definitely changes most of the time based off of what system they're using for tracking applications. But generally, a PDF of a document is the best way to share your information via email or even put into a computer program because most can just parse the words and put it into a text format in that. But sometimes they might ask for a Word file or a text, like just the text without the formatting version. So when you have your resume and cover letter, just keep in mind that you might need to save them in different formats. So generally just the PDF, a Word file, which you can save like Google Documents in that kind of Word file type. And then a text version, which is literally just like a copy and paste and put it into WordPad in Windows. That would be the just basic text version.
Almost every application is sent online now. Do you still need to include an employer's postal address in a cover letter?
Oh, that's a good point. It's one of those older, archaic type of things that have just stuck around, but it shows that you've done a little bit of work, especially if you know that they're like a franchise location and you're applying for a specific location, putting that specific location's address and maybe even referring to the hiring manager that maybe their name or position was mentioned in the job description. You can say, um, instead of to whom it may concern, it'd be like to like the director of HR or manager of people at the beginning. And if you use that little bit of phrasing, it's very formal and it kind of seems a little odd in our more technological focused society now, but it just adds a little bit more of a personal touch.
What about fonts? In our first segment, you mentioned avoiding using small fonts. keep the font size readable. And you suggested using common fonts like Arial was one that you cited. But when you do that, is it okay as well to use italics, bold, or underlined if you want to emphasize certain words or sentences?
Definitely. Because, and this applies to both the cover letter and the resume, you want to make sure it's easy to scan and highlight those certain parts. So if you say during your story want to mention that you worked with a certain program, you can either bold that or you can italicize that so that when the person's reading through the cover letter, they can easily pull that part of the story out to share with their hiring team. And it also just shows that, like, you know where your worth is and you want to highlight that and make sure they definitely see that and notice that.
Finally, what about length? Can a cover letter that makes you stand out be longer than one page? Should it never be longer than one page? What are your thoughts here?
When it comes to length, I would suggest no more than one page. But say you're super passionate about the position and you really want to show like two different stories. Um, you can always, and this is one of the positive parts of working with a PDF and sending that kind of a document instead of a Word file. You can mess with the margins or change the font size just by half a point. So it's pretty, like really close to your resume font size to squeeze it all onto one page. And it's ideal for that because we were already going through quite a few resumes and cover letters. And it's unfortunately, it's a time thing because there's a lot of great applicants and we want to make sure we can give everybody a good amount of time to show what they can bring to the position.
Well, it's been a great conversation. Now, Kai, tell us what's next for you.
Well, for me, I will continue to be working with Habitat for Humanity Portland region, just making sure that I'm supporting the teams that are bringing decent and affordable housing to historically left out groups in the Portland region for homeownership specifically. And also one thing that is great is that we have a home repair program. So I'm working with our home repair director and bulking up his team because there's a lot of interest in that opportunity that Habitat can provide as well.
Terrific. Well, I know that listeners can learn more about you and your work at Habitat for Humanity Portland Region by visiting the Habitat for Humanity Portland Region website, as well as the organization's LinkedIn page. And we'll be sure to include links for both sites in our show notes. Now, Kai, given all the great advice you've shared today, what's the one thing you want a listener to remember about how to write a cover letter that makes you stand out?
You're a star. You're amazing and awesome, and you have something that you can bring to every position that you come to. And while it can be a daunting task to continue to apply to multiple positions, and some of them seem like the same position over and over again, what you can do is just make sure you continue to share your story because that's really what is important and will definitely help you stand out amongst everybody in that applicant pool.
Next week, our guest will be Jessica Kahn. She's the Human Resources Manager at Oregon AFSCME Council 75. It's one of the fastest growing unions in Oregon and represents more than 33,000 workers. When you find a job where you feel comfortable, you're more productive and connected to your work and your colleagues. Join us next Wednesday when Jessica Kahn and I talk about why culture fit matters and how to address it in your job search. Until next time, thanks for letting us help you find your dream job. This show is produced by Max List. Susan Thornton-Hoff schedules our guests and writes our newsletter. Lisa Kislenberry-Anderson manages our social media. Our sound engineer and editor is Matt Fiorillo. Dawn Mole creates our transcripts, and our music is by Freddie Trujillo. This is Mac Pritchard. See you next week. Have you ever been asked this in a job interview? Tell me about a time when you didn't agree with your boss. What would you say? This is what's called a behavioral interview question, and it's a common tactic. Employers use this kind of question to explore your fit for a job based on your past experience. It can be an easy question to answer if you have the right strategy. I show you how to answer these gotcha questions in our free Max List guide, 100 Behavioral Interview Questions You Need to Know. To get your copy, visit maxlist.org/questions. You'll also learn 4 simple steps for answering any behavioral interview question. Again, that's maxlist.org/questions. You can count on getting these questions in your next interview. Why not get the answers before you walk into the interview room? Go to maxlist.org/questions.